Hey, how you doing today? It's your boy Chris Harris, and welcome to another episode of Open Doors. I'm so thankful that you took the time to check out this episode, to check out this podcast, and I know today we're going to have an awesome time. But before we get started, this is what I want you to do. I need you to, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button because we're dropping episode after episode and you don't have time to be searching or wondering when it's going to drop. So hit that subscribe button. So anytime we drop an episode, it's going to come right to you. All right. Also, like the episode, share the episode. As I said, we're going to have an awesome time today. All right. Here on Open Doors today, I have a guest with me and we're going to have a discussion. This guest, this brother is a talented brother. I just want to do this. I just want to share some snippets, some things about his bio. This brother right here, he's a 2024 Grammy Award contender in 6 categories for spoken word album, The Truth, The Way, The Life. Also, his project One Shot Away was up for a Special Merit Award as Best Song for Social Change. 1 Million Black Men video was a nominee for the Mayor's Office inaugural Chicago Poet Laureate 2023. This brother right here is an activist, is an advocate against gun violence for 31 years. I want everyone out there to welcome my brother, Kweisi the poet. Kweisi, how you doing today?
I am brilliantly blessed, Pastor Chris.
Welcome.
How are you?
I'm great. Welcome to the Open Door podcast. I'm so glad that you could sit down with me so we can rap. Now, tell us a little bit about yourself. Anything I missed that you want the people to know, tell us about yourself.
Correction on my spoken word album was a contender in 7 categories for the 2024 Grammy Awards. That basically means that it was up for consideration. I didn't make it as a nominee, but nonetheless, the album had reached contendership in seven categories. And I was a nominee for Chicago's inaugural Poet Laureate position 2023. I studied abroad in Oxford, England. I'm a self-published author, poet. I spent the past 17 years living in Hollywood as a brand strategist, public relation guru, and media relation guy. Some of my clients you may know. Hill Harper, who's currently up for U.S. Senate candidate in Michigan. I worked with the likes of Terrell Owens, Hall of Fame T.O.
Okay.
Reality star Gloria Govan. She she was a talent that helped the Basketball Wives expand their franchise to LA Basketball Wives. Sierra Payton, she played Wendy Williams in the docu-series, The Wendy Williams Show. So those are some of the clients that I work with in Hollywood. So, but nonetheless, I'm just a humble human being seeking to do God's work by serving him to serve the people.
Amen. Amen.
Yes.
So I've talked to you. We've rapped a little bit. I just want to jump into some things with you, man, because you're such a vast and open book. You know what I'm saying? So much knowledge and depth with you. So let me ask you this question. You've been a advocate and activist against gun violence for 31 years, correct?
Yes.
So how did we get there? How did we get there? Let me know.
Well, actually, 32 years ago, my younger brother Lamont was killed, January 11th, 1992 to be exact. Lamont forfeited his life to save a friend's life. He wasn't at the wrong place at the wrong time. He was in our neighborhood, matter of fact, on our block, 6 or 7 doors down from our house. On this particular evening, an unusually warm winter day in Chicago, 2 guys have been walking up and down the street all day. At this particular time, 12 noon, Lamont is at the mall doing what teenagers do, buying some sneakers, some clothes with my nephew, and probably, talking to some girls. His friend had noticed the 2 gentlemen back on the block, and the guys had walked by the group and said, ain't nothing but GDs around here. So Lamont's friends kept to themselves, like, yo, we not in that space. Fast forward later on that evening, Lamont comes home, eat dinner with my mother, ask if he can go out. My mother said, yeah, that's cool. This is 1992, so it wasn't the technology that we have today. Nonetheless, teenagers were being teenagers. They get together, watch movies, play video games, listen to music videos. And so as everyone was going to check back in with their parents, Lamont and Kim Their mother had already known where they were. My mom knew where Lamont was, so he didn't have to check in. So as Lamont and Kim was waiting for their friends to come back from checking in with their parents, the two guys, Eric Taylor and Jonathan Jenkins, come back on the block, but this time in a car. Jonathan pulls the car in front of Lamont and Kim, stops the car. Eric gets out to approach Kim. Kim thought Eric was going to ask for directions, so she stepped back. Eric approached her again. She stepped back, and that's when Eric revealed the sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun. Lamont stepped in to protect Kim, like, yo, what's going on? Told her to step back. From that point, Eric turned his attention from Kim to Lamont. Was like, yo, dude, we got something to talk about. Lamont was like, what? What do we have to talk about? Eric forced Lamont in the car with 12 gauge to his back. Jonathan drove off, and Kim ran to my mom's house, banging on the door. Diane, Diane, somebody kidnapped Lamont. So they took Lamont 3 miles from our home, from 136th and Low Street to Dixmoor, 142nd and Lincoln Street. During the 3-mile ride, they made Lamont strip of all of his clothing, even his underwear. Eric told Lamont to get out of the car, placed him on his knees, shot him execution style. Left his naked body there. 2 weeks later, when they caught Eric and Jonathan had my brother braided starter jacket, his stonewashed jeans, and his black and white bottom Fila FX100s. And so that was the catalyst of me becoming who I am today, being in the space of an activist and an advocate against human violence with guns. And initially, I didn't know how to process the pain, the hurt, the anger, the rage. I turned to alcohol, drugs, and being promiscuous. And then when I found writing became my way to deal with the pain, the hurt, the trauma, to process it in a creative way, to the point that when those external things wasn't numbing the pain, I thought of taking my life via suicide. And so One Shot Away, that poem, which was up for the Grammy Award, Merit Award, was sung best song for social change. And that song, prevented me from taking my life. It talks about my dark thoughts of wanting to, take my life via suicide. And so this is how we got here today. I refuse to I refuse, one, to become a double victim of the crime, but it was because of my brother's intrepid act that I am who I am today, and being in the space of human violence prevention with guns.
Wow. 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 So you talked about the trauma that how this affected you, but your brother, and how it led you to alcohol, being promiscuous with women. How many give me your family dynamic during that time when you lost your brother? It was you, your I know you had your mother, and you said you had, how many siblings you
I
had?
have 2 older sisters.
Okay.
Yes.
So how did it affect the family? Because this is something that we deals with in our inner cities on a regular basis, and we kind of dismiss it and go about it. Yeah, we see the victim, which is horrible in itself, but we don't know what happens to the family afterward. Give me some insight into your family, how this affected your family with your brother.
Unfortunately, for 50 years, my family has dealt with gun violence, going back to when I was 4 years of age, when my Uncle Levi was killed on 82nd and Emerald. I could still hear the screams of my aunties when he was shot and killed. Nonetheless, I was 4, I didn't understand it, but now being old is like, man, gun violence has affected me for a long time in my family. And Lamont's murder was very tempestuous time in my family life, and each one of my siblings and my mother have dealt with it differently. My older sister, she's been strung out on heroin for the past 30 years. And she just recently checked herself into a rehab that she's been 90 days clean. My second older sister, due to domestic violence, unfortunately, in that space, she shot and killed my nephew's father. So initially, she thought that it was a retribution or revenge to her shooting my nephew's father. So she had to process that pain, and she dealt with it in a way where it was, whether it been gluttony or food or just the trauma, the pain and the hurt. My mom, she still hasn't got to the place of forgiveness yet, though she's a God-fearing woman, church going, goes to 2 churches every Sunday. And then myself personally, I turn to, those external things regarding the pleasures of my skin to numb the pain. And the trauma has been, it's been unbearable for us all, because it's a life-changing event. And whether it was 30 days ago, 3 years ago, 30 years ago, what time allows one to do is heal, but process it, but you never forget that pain and hurt. I remember as though it was yesterday when my sister called me on January 12th. I was a senior at Central State University. I remember the call. My frat brother, bro, your sister on the phone. I think something bad happened. And my sister like, Junior, you got to come home. Somebody kidnapped Lamont. And I'm my mom, and in my mind, and I literally said this to myself. It's like, bruh, if they kidnapped you, they want some money. I think they're gonna keep you because we ain't got no money. We don't have no money, you know. And then, but my mom or my sister didn't want to tell me that they had murdered him because they didn't want me on the road distraught, driving by myself. So, Central State to Chicago was normally a 4.5 hour, 5 hour trip. I got home in 3 hours.
Mm.
As soon as I walked in the door, my sister and mother embraced me and said, Junior, they killed Lamont. And I cried. But one of my frat brothers told me, he's like, whatever you do, you got to be strong for your family. Most importantly, be strong for yourself. And so for many months, that's what I was. I was being strong, but I was still, initially, I was shocked. When I went back to college, I was going to drop out. My mom was like, no, you about to graduate. You finish school. And I said, okay, cool. What I'll do every other weekend, I'll come home. But I had turned to drinking. Like I would drink a 40 ounce of 800 Old English, every day to go to sleep. Because I used to dream about Eric and Jonathan before I met them, before I saw them in court. And then I went from a 40 ounce of beer every night to drinking a fifth of Cisco.
Wow.
And Cisco's like liquid crack,
Right.
And I developed that habit to suppress my dreams and to suppress the trauma. And then when we went to court, and the first time I went to court, I'm like, dang, these are the brothers I was dreaming about. And then I went from drinking what I was drinking to drinking straight up liquor right before I would go to court, or getting high before going to court, or getting high after court, or drinking after court. And so the trauma has affected us all, and to this day it still affects us. Like I said, my mom still hasn't gotten to the place of forgiveness, but I'm trying to teach my mother through the work that I'm doing that her youngest son, her baby, life and death means something. That eventually she will walk into the spirit of forgiveness to see that even in death, her son life meant something through his intrepid act to protect his friend from them kidnapping, raping, and perhaps killing her.
Wow. Yes. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at your family with the trauma that it caused by the murder of your brother. Now speak to this, because do you believe that this is what's going on in our communities, with everything that's happening in our community, with the violence, that it has this lasting effect with trauma?
Oh, very much so. And if we don't, the root cause of all crime is trauma. It's pain, it's hurt, it's anger, it's disappointment, it's hate. It's, a child seeing his mother beat up by her father, like Bobby, who my sister shot. He was a good brother, he was one of the best wrestlers in our school, but he grew up in a household where his father beat up his mother. So he was traumatized. So he was acting out what he saw his father do to his mother, that when he got my sister pregnant and she became his baby's mother, he felt, well, that's what he needed to do to put his girlfriend or baby mother in line, hit upside down. And I remember Bobby used to beat my sister up, and I've seen it. And I'm 14, 15. At that time, I'm about 101 pounds soaking wet. There's nothing I could do with him. And I couldn't protect my sister. I mean, he was the best wrestler in our high school. Mm-hmm. And I would just sit there. My sister go to school with black eyes and things of that nature. And it was just like, and then, my sister, she was in the street organization. She was a gangster disciple. So at this one particular time, her friend and she would walk her friend home from my house, and a guy jumped out and flashed them. And so she told her current boyfriend at the time, and he said, okay, I'm gonna give you this piece to carry, so this is not gonna happen to you again. And it's just hoping the time she went to go pick up my nephew, she had the gun on her. And so when Bobby tried to beat her up at that particular point, she pulled the gun and like, yo, dude, stop, and I'm gonna shoot you. And she said that not to shoot him, but to stop him from hitting her. And he's like, you ain't gonna shoot me, slap the gun. and it went off. It hit him. She didn't know she had shot him in the head. His mother called my mom, like, your daughter shot my son. He's
Mm.
dead. And my sister's like, I didn't shoot him. I didn't even know the gun went off. So my mom took her to the police department, turned her in. It's like, yo, we gonna, do this together. So it affected us all. And to this day, in our community, until we address the root cause of the pain and the hurt, we're going to continue to be traumatized. And this violence is going to continue to be perpetuated in our community, from domestic violence to imprisonment to mental illness, to even suicide. So. And until we provide the community with the right resources for mental health and wellness, it's going to continue. Unfortunately, we're going to have the uptake of gun violence and crime, carjackings, and things of that nature.
Now, I know you just said something to me, and I want to kind of piggyback off that. You mentioned you talking about your mom hasn't got to a place of forgiveness yet,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to touch on that per se. But I want to talk about how you think she deals with her trauma, because that was your sister, right, who had the incident with the and then
Yeah.
then with the baby daddies, right,
Mm-hmm.
and then your brother, losing your brother. That's a lot for a person. So
Well,
how do you think?
my mom, she is a very, very, oh my man, you about to get me emotional.
Take it. It's okay. It's okay. Because you trigger something. I was like, wow, not just your brother, but that situation
No,
with your sister.
my mom, she's dealt with a lot with her children. And seeing her oldest being strung out on heroin and trying to be supportive of her to help her get the help that she needs. But you can't get nobody the help that they need unless they want the help themselves.
Yeah.
And so my sister finally decided, I can't be in this space no more.
Mm.
So she turned herself, signed herself into a drug rehab. And then dealing with what Tanya, my sister, dealt with the domestic violence situation. And then her youngest son being killed, and then my sister, her son was shot twice.
Mm.
Once, 8 times survived. 2010, 2013, he was shot again. Once survived. And he knew the shooters. And living by the street code, he didn't snitch on the shooters. So if we're not gonna snitch on the shooters in our community, we gotta get them young brothers help,
Yeah.
mental health, because every time they get angry, they're gonna go up and spray the block up or spray the person up. And so we're not gonna snitch. We gotta say, okay, all right, little junior, we know you did this. We gotta send you to the clinic up the block to get you this mental health and wellness help, because you can't. We gotta process this pain and hurt, because hurt people, heal people. And so I've been in this space and processing, even to this day, the pain, the hurt, the anger, through poetry, through sharing my story, because it allows me to heal and process, as well. And so, but until we address the trauma in our communities, unfortunately, our community is going to be in an emotional prison, in that bondage space.
So let's go there. Let's go there. Addressing the trauma in our community. How, in your perspective, Kweisi, how do we start that? And also, not just how do we start that, do you feel like our government should have a role in this as well?
Oh, definitely. One, it definitely starts from a personal perspective, recognizing that one is mentally ill, being able to identify that illness and get the person the help, and or the person being able to recognize that sickness themselves to get themselves hurt. Like when you know your toothache, oh, my toothache, you recognize that. You could tell everybody your toothache, but until you decide to go to the dentist yourself
Mm-hmm.
to resolve that tooth pain, it's gonna hurt. When you got a headache, you sick, you tell everybody, oh, I'm not feeling good today, but until you go to the doctor to see what is causing the symptoms for your illness, you're going to stay sick. But you go to the doctor. So personally that emotionally you're hurt. And it's okay to be hurt. It is okay. One thing I try to share through my story, your feelings are never wrong.
Mm.
To be angry, to be disappointed, to be heartbroken, to be disappointed, to be enraged, those emotions are not wrong. They are what they are. Once you identify that, now you need to get help to process it. And it's okay to go to a therapist, a life coach. We say in the community, you're a shrink. I don't want nobody to think I'm crazy. Well, when you tell people you got a toothache, you don't think people gonna think you crazy because you tell them you got a toothache.
Yeah.
So if you tell people I'm mentally not doing well, it's okay to go to a life coach, go to a therapist, and it's okay. You want to play sports, you get a basketball coach. Any sport that you want to do, you have someone
Get a
to
coach.
accept you get better. Anything in life that something's wrong with you, you go get assistance or help for it. So dealing with mental illness, dealing with trauma, it's okay to get help. Even though I found poetry, I still see a therapist or a life coach for certain things. You have a mentor. You have someone that is better than you in life to give you guidance and to help you move through this maze that we call life. And it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to know that your feelings are never wrong. How do you process that? Because hey, even love can make you do some crazy things.
Yeah.
So if you don't know how to process that love, it could have you socially stalking somebody or physically stalking them, or you in a domestic violence situation, man or woman. So we have to be real and honest with ourselves to say, I'm sick. I am not mentally doing well. And once we can identify that as individuals, then we could turn it around from a personal standpoint. And then, of course, the government should help because, as you know, back in the day, and I think it was President Ronald Reagan, they start taking all these mental health facilities out of the community. And when that started happening, you started to see the decline of mental health and wellness in the community across the board. You know, so the government definitely has a role to play because we do pay taxes, and those taxes are supposed to benefit the people in a way in which that we provide a better quality life for all the citizens in Chicago, state of Illinois, and America as a whole.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, you talked about yourself being a poet, and you talked about your trauma that you had and how you found that release, if I can say, or that therapy for you in your poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me when that started, and also tell me how the arts, if I can say it that way, how
Mm-hmm.
the arts have really helped you cope with everything.
Um, it started. It actually started. Me. I went through this period, getting back to my mother, where I hated my mom
Mm.
because in my selfishness, I'm like, if you didn't teach us to be this way, I would still have my brother. So I hated her. I mean, I went through a period of my life where I hated black people because all the pain and the hurt that was caused to myself and my family is caused by other black people. Of course, I hated black men because my brother died by two brothers. I hated black women because my brother sacrificed his life to save a female friend, a black woman. I hated my mom, and I was like, Mom, if you didn't teach us this, I would have my brother. And this is my own selfishness. And the person I hated the most was myself. Because being an older brother, Lamar being younger, we shared a room. And I literally, when we was kids, I would put a tape down the center of the room. You stay on your side because you always dirty. You don't like to clean up. And if he didn't clean up, I beat him up. And I thought I indirectly taught him passivity. That when Eric approached him with the gun and forced him in the car, I thought he should have resisted or fought back. So I blamed myself for my brother's death. And I went through that period of hate and anger and not liking myself. And so poetry and I was writing about that, and then my writing started. Um, I met this this woman. Her name Tirsa. I was at an Art Kelly event that WGCI was hosting because at the time I was doing a spoken word segment on WGCI radio with the Rick Party Show, and I met Tirsa. And back then, there was no cell phones. Whatever you had a beeper, you was probably considered the man.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? I didn't have a beeper. Nonetheless, and so back then you would actually have a conversation with a woman, ask her for her phone number, write it on a napkin, and so we was having a conversation with our eyes, and through that conversation with our eyes, it gave me the confidence to go have a conversation with her. And I said, "My name is Kweisi. What's yours?" We conversed. She gave me her number, and so I would call her, and we'd be on the phone 2 or 3 hours or whatever, and then I would hang up. And then I had all these emotions. I was like, man, I should have said that in my phone conversation. Sure. So I started writing all these things down. So after about 2 or 3 months of writing all this stuff down, she invited me over her house. It was strictly platonic relationship. She invited me over her house. I said, man, this is how I feel about you. And so I gave her one of those me composition books with everything that I wrote
Mm-hmm.
about her. And so writing her taught me how to write down my other feelings and dealing with other things that I was dealing with. And then a friend of mine invited me to a poetry reading at Dejois back in the day. Anybody know Dejois? It's a cool spot on, I believe, Franklin. And they had poetry there. And mine wasn't poetry. I was just writing what I felt regarding dealing with the pain with my mom. And they was like, yo, that was deep. You should come back. I was like, really? You should come back next week. You should come back next week. And then every week I would see these different poets perform. I was like, dang, they dope. I was like, I like this. And then going to court for almost 3.5 years and dealing with my brother's murder, the prosecution attorney had, in preparing us for the trial, he showed me the pictures that would come out of my brother, how they did them. And he said, because I got to prepare you and your family for this. So when this come out, there's no outburst in court. So he showed me the photos. I told my mother about them because I didn't want her to see them. And then I said, can I keep this photo? And that was a gunshot wound to my brother's head. And I would sit in my room and I would just look at the photo. And then I wrote my first poem, His Face. His face, the right side of his head had a hole in it the size of a grapefruit. His face, the ear on the right side of his head was barely attached. His face, his eyes were still open. They had bulged out of his head, and his head had became disfigured from the gunshot blast. His face, blood had ran from his nose to his mouth, while blood on the morgue table sat in puddles from the head wound. His face, Lamont didn't even look like him. His face, only if you, Lamont didn't even look like him. Only if you, Lamont, only if you could see his face, Lamont didn't even look like him. Only if you could see his face. And this is a photo of my younger brother. This is the first poem that I've written. His face, you know? And so that poem was the first poem that I've ever written. And then from there, it just kept coming out. And then I would go read the poetry, and then it's like, yo, that's deep, come back. I was like, all right. And I just kept writing and kept writing and kept writing. And I started writing about all the things in which I was dealing with during this particular time of my life and dealing with my brother's death, from politics to relationships to whatever it was that I was going through. I mean, I was constantly writing. I was writing on the L, the bus. I was writing on the toilet. And so poetry just helped me process a lot of pain and hurt. And then I would go to poetry readings, and people was like, you should write a book. I was like, yeah, whatever. You should write a book. It's like, yeah, whatever. And I'm like, after 15, 20 people kept telling me I should write a book, I said, I guess the demand is write a book. So I was like, do I got enough poems to have a book? And so I started going to do research on poetry books at Barnes and Nobles or Barnes and Nobles, and what's the other one? Uh,
Borders.
Borders.
Okay.
So I would go to the poetry section. I would look at all kinds of poetry books and like the size, the spine, and all that. It's just like, okay. And so I said, yeah, I got enough poems. And I said, all right, I'm gonna do a book. And I entitled my book Innocent Rage. Innocent being Lamont was an innocent victim of a violent crime. Rage in a positive sense means desire, passion, and enthusiasm. So through my poetry, I'm expressing my innocent rage. That it allowed me to deal and process the pain and the hurt. Now, I had no desire to be a poet or become a poet. I wasn't taught poetry through the ivory walls of academia. It was strictly through the universe of life and dealing with my brother's death and processing it through the art of poetry. It had taken me abroad to study abroad at Oxford Brookes University in Oxford, England. And I seek to use my poetry in a way in which to empower, inspire, and provoke thought and provoke change. You know, because what my brother did at 17 years of age was a stupendous, intrepid act. And I was like, man, would I have done that at 17? you know. And like even now, what my brother has done, I'm taking his baton. I'm like, okay, cool. We gonna go on the block, and we unfortunately gun violence is still being perpetuated at such a high level in our community that even though my brother was killed 32 years ago, his death is still relevant today. My story isn't unique in the sense that my brother was killed. What makes my story unique is that I've been able to process it through poetry. And I wrote and met the men who shot and killed my brother to make peace. And it gave me the opportunity to study abroad in Oxford, England, and then lived in Hollywood, as I shared earlier, for 17 years. But the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events emailed me January 6th. Oh, Kweisi, we created the position of Poet Laureate. This is the inaugural year. We want you to apply. Like, man, I've been seeking this position since 1997 when Mayor Daley was in office.
Wow.
And every mayor thereafter, I would pitch the mayor's office, create the position, and appoint myself. You know, so when I got the email from department from DK, so I'm like, man, I know I moved to LA to turn my book into a feature film. I moved there for film and TV, but I say my literary dream is my passion. So I'm about to leave this Hollywood dream for my literary dream. And I moved back to Chicago on January 13. Though I wasn't appointed, I was disappointed, but I wasn't going to let that defer my literary aspirations. So I decided to stay in Chicago, fighting a good fight regarding human violence against guns. And that's the how poetry has affected my life. And I just simply try to, well, I don't try, I use it as an art form to like I said, inspire, empower, and provoke thought and others, and to challenge people specifically in their spiritual or religious faith. And how poetry empowered me through the grace and mercy of God to write, meet, and forgive Eric and Jonathan, because I believe, and I'm not perfect, you know, but I know I tapped into that spirit and that principle of forgiveness, that which you're taught as a babe or a child at Bible class or Sunday school. That's the first principle that we all are taught, but we have not learned to apply it to our lives in a way in which that we challenge ourselves to heal ourselves, because forgiveness truly is about freeing yourself from your emotional bondage of pain, hurt, anger, and hate. It's not about the person that caused it, because they can care less if you forgave them or not. It's about you. And some may say it's a selfish act, and it is. And it's okay to be selfish to yourself for your own mental health and wellness. Because once you free yourself of that emotional bondage, you allow yourself this mental health and wellness. But when you don't, you stay in this emotional prison and you become bitter, hurt, angry, and you take that baggage, that emotional baggage from one relationship to the next. And you know what the saying is, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like my book, The Bars. I had to go into the mental prison of myself, my mind, to free myself from that emotional baggage. So everything on my title, the cover of my book means something. I just didn't do it to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Even the number 7, it took me 7 years to get to the process of my book or writing it. My brother was killed January 11th, 92. My book came out January 11th, 1999, 7 years after my brother was killed. And as you know, 7 is a spiritual number of completion.
Yes.
It's the only number you could take from a 45-degree angle, go 360 degrees. 4 plus 5 is 9. 3 plus 6 is 0. So everything is done in my book, for even the blood. Blood, in one sense, represents death, but it also could represent life.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so that's the impact of how poetry has had in my life, and has taken someone like me who grew up in a single parent home with my mom raising 4 children, to taking me abroad to study in a Master's of Literature program in Oxford, England. And once I found my voice as a poet, I said I want to be the best at it. I want to be the Michael Jordan of my sport or my art, you know, and not to be better than anyone else, but to be the best version of my authentic and organic self. And so when I write, I'm not afraid to address my ugliness, who I am as a human being, as a man who know I'm broken, you know. And yes, I might have forgiven the man who killed my brother, but I know my heart is broken into a million pieces. And through the art of poetry, I constantly try to glue those pieces back together on a day-to-day basis, because each day it's a new challenge, you know, to give the Jesus in me a rebirth, to carry my cross. And And I know specifically staying in Chicago, God has blessed me with this mission and this vision to a call of action for a ceasefire in the city of Chicago for Memorial Weekend this year. As you may know, living in Hollywood for the past 17 years, each year I would see the horrendous gun violence in the city of Chicago, specifically during Memorial Weekend, which is historically Chicago's most violent weekend.
Yes.
And I said, I refuse, Pastor Chris, to be here this year and not do something about it, to change that local, regional, national, and global narrative that this holiday weekend will be Chicago's violent weekend. And so God has given me a vision. Like, you don't need to be the mayor to call a ceasefire. You don't need to be a dignitary. I'm just a concerned Chicagoan who's a poet that has a love for my city, that I know that we could reach the young people in a way in which most of these young people don't want to be doing what they're doing, but because they haven't been taught to identify their pain, their hurt, their trauma, they express it the best way they know how. Oh, you hurt me? Oh, how am I hurt you? Well, I saw somebody hurt my family. Now you hurt me. My anger and rage, I'm taking out on you. And that's being reciprocated on a day-to-day basis in the city of Chicago, specifically on the South and West Side and the Black and Brown community. So my call to action to Black and Brown community, specifically Black men, is that we need to be accountable to each other. We need to listen to the voices of our young brothers and reach out to them, show compassion, listen. No, we're not going to prevent or stop gun violence because we live in a gun culture society. But a lot of it could be prevented, mitigated, intervened, long as we show that we care. And I can identify with the pain and hurt. My family's been through it across the board, from 1974 when my uncle was killed to my nephew who was shot twice. Know the guys who killed him, so he forgave them because I'm like, you got to, because when you get back on the block, you're going to see him again. You're going to see him. And you know what? Pastor Chris, he saw him. Mm-hmm. And because he didn't snitch, you know how we as Black men in the neighborhood, in the hood, we see each other. That sign of respect is what we do.
Yeah.
That nod.
Mm-hmm.
They gave him the nod. He gave him the nod. Like, okay, we respect you. Thank you for not snitching. But again, he didn't snitch on them, but we still need to get those brothers help.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, but that's the power of poetry for me. And we all have the capacity to write. We all have access to a pen and pad. You might not have access or come and go to a therapist right now, but again, you can identify writing, journaling. You ain't got to become a poet. You just write because you're letting it out. If somebody pissed you off, cuss them out on paper. You have dark thoughts of suicide, write about it on paper, because me writing about suicide creatively allowed me to take my life creatively on the page that I didn't do it in reality.
Wow.
Because death, I can come back from a broken heart. I can come back from being emotionally hurt that my brother was killed. But I can't come back once I take my life.
Can't come back from that.
Ain't no coming back from that. You know what I'm saying? So the power of poetry for me has been exactly that. It saved my life, Pastor Chris.
Wow. That's deep. That's deep. So talk to us, because a lot of people need to hear this. How did you get to that place where you forgave your brother's killers?
Again, Pastor Chris, I didn't want to be a double victim of both, one, the crime itself, and then the emotional crime that I would allow to continue to perpetuate my own mind. I didn't want to be a double victim. I mean, it hurts. And I'm not going to front, and I'm not going to say to somebody that experienced it, it don't hurt. It hurt. Like living in Hollywood, and then you would see these mass shootings. And my estranged wife, my ex-wife, I didn't know when these shootings happen, like in Sandy Hook or Parkland, I would drink more. I got in a dark place because unbeknownst to me, those things affected me. And my wife would say, every time these mass shootings happen, you get very isolated. You get into this dark place and you drink more heavily. And I didn't recognize that. And so when a mass shooting happened there at the Parkland, I was like, okay, I know it now, identified. I didn't drink, and so, I mean, it hurts. But I identify that hurt. I identify the pain to this day, that I don't do anything self-destructive to myself, that I become a detriment to myself. Now, I still have drugged myself through some muddy waters and dealing in processes of pain, some other hurt and trauma. And as I was sharing with you earlier, I had an emotional moment when you took me to lunch. And again, thank you for lunch.
Oh, no problem.
And I went to the laboratory and I had an emotional moment. Just thanking God for his grace and mercy on me and everything that I've been through. That he kept me. Even when I was living in Hollywood, I look back at my life and see some of the compromising situations that I put myself in, that God protected me, you know? And I drug, unfortunately, my ex-wife through some muddy waters because of my dysfunction, unhealthy and toxic behavior, you know? And I'm not using my brother's situation as a crutch, but more as a springboard. But I understand and being traumatized the way that I was, because some people say, well, your brother was killed, get over it. It was 32 years ago. And it's like, how did for somebody to tell somebody that is very insensitive and almost disrespectful in a sense, because it's a life changing event that your life will never be the same now. Never. And so it's every day is healing, every day is processing, but it hurts. It hurts. But through poetry, and this is why I say poetry, because it's a very inexpensive art form. Got a pen and a pad, you just write, So we all have the capacity to do as such, and so I just try to use. I use poetry as an art form to share with others and how it impacted my life. And I wasn't taught this in the walls of academia, that if I could do it, you definitely could do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was listening to your project, The Truth, The Way, The Life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to a lot of the tracks. Give me like some information on that. How did you come up with that?
So again, everything that I do, I am seeking to serve God by serving the people and to be a light in the darkness. And as before I call out anybody, I'm gonna first and foremost call out myself. And sometimes as human beings, specifically as Black men, that's a very arduous thing to do, to self-reflect and say, dude, you ugly. You know what I'm saying? That was inappropriate, or you're being self-destructive. And even a friend of mine, he shared with me, I had a couple legal situations against me, and he was like, man, your behavior is a poor man's excuse for suicide. And I never understood that until last September, when I put myself in a very uncompromising situation. I lost a 6-figure client opportunity. And it finally hit me what he was talking about. And I was like, a poor man's excuse for suicide. Unbeknownst to myself, I was still seeking to take my life via alcoholism. And I was over drinking, seeking to poison myself by over drinking to escape life. As recently as last August. And I was like, oh, what the? I understood then what he shared with me in 2008 regarding a poor man's excuse for suicide. I was like, man, I was trying to take my life via alcohol over drinking, over indulging. And I was like, I got it. So going through that situation that had happened to me, because life, God, until you learn the lesson, life gonna keep testing you until you pass the test. You know what I'm saying? But once you pass that test, then you got to move on to the next test. And I wasn't learning my life lessons. I kept putting myself through my behavior through these. It's like, now I'm no longer going through those behavioral patterns of dysfunction and toxicity to myself, that I was able to look at it and say, oh, I'm the common denominator in all of this. If I want these things to change, I have to change myself. So my album is a self-reflection and a letter to myself, indirectly a letter to the Black man, saying we can change our community by first and foremost by changing ourselves. And until we change ourselves, our communities are going to stay what they are today: mentally impoverished, economically impoverished, lack of support, lack of social economic support, and things of that nature.
Awesome.
So the truth, the way, the life is a homage to that Bible verse of God, Jesus being the truth, the way, the life. And I am seeking to be that through my literature and my day-to-day walk, as a believer of the Most High through his son, the Prince of Peace.
Great. I just want to highlight a couple of the tracks that I listened to and just kind of get a feel for your inspiration behind it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is 1 Million Black Men. Talk to me.
So 1 Million Black Men. I had a client. He's still a client, but he's not he's not on the client playlist. But we still are cool. David Anderson. He a global financial strategist. He worked in President Obama's first administration in finance, and he commissioned me to write this poem. He was working on a project last spring regarding educating 1 million Black men throughout the African diaspora on building generational wealth, 7 generations deep. And so he was like, "Can you write me something based on me doing this particular project?" I was like, "Yeah." And so I wrote the piece 1 Million Black Men, and I read it. So he was like, "Yo, bruh, that's deep. Oh, I love it." And so that's what my inspiration. But again, it's a letter to Black men, a poem to Black men, that until we change ourselves, ain't nobody gonna come in our community and help save us or change us. We have to first seek the help that we need ourselves as individuals, then collectively, then as a community. Like I said, when your toothache, you ain't gotta go. You might tell somebody your toothache, but you still gotta go do the things that you need to do to go to the dentist to get that root canal or that toothache dealt with. So when you're dealing with mental illness or mental pain or hurt, you gotta get yourself some help. For me, it started by writing and journaling. Then, of course, I did start seeing a therapist for certain things in life. But for me, because even when you can't afford a therapist, um, and then I didn't like the traditional sense of therapy for myself, because it's to the point you go in there, you get an hour, then you might have your breakthrough, and they're like, "Nope, gotta stop, got another client coming." So I really like life coaches, because
Okay.
with your life coach, whether you call them for 5 minutes and talk to them, or you can call them for 90 minutes and talk to them and still get it out. Because therapy really isn't about someone telling you what to do. It's you identifying it yourself with them guiding you, but you still got to answer your own questions.
Yeah.
So the therapist or your life coach don't answer the questions for you. They just guide you along the way, as a coach does when you playing basketball. But you still got to give yourself the skill set, the tools to be able to process your pain and hurt, to answer your questions. But a life coach or a therapist there to just help guide you along that emotional path, that you're able to discover that pain, that hurt, and what may have caused it for yourself.
Awesome. Awesome. And another one I want to throw out there to you: Dream to a Nightmare. Talk to me about that one.
Well, that's an homage to MLK.
Okay.
Even though he's been deceased, uh, basically, what, 56 years, the very things that he talked about then regarding the Vietnam War, to equal housing, job opportunities, universal health care, those are the same issues being discussed and talked about today. Some of the same social ills that are going on in our communities today. And so that was a piece, because even Dr. King stated, in a conversation that he had with NBC, it was May of 67, that speech on Washington was wishful thinking, that he might have been in quote unquote la la land in that thought process. And if he had not probably misled the community in thinking that way, because it's like that dream ain't a dream, it's a nightmare. Black men or Black people in America is a nightmare. You know, every day, it's been scientifically proven that Black people, specifically Black men in America, when we leave our house and the trauma that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, is like a veteran coming home from war with PST, post-traumatic PTSD. And then until we realize the challenges that all human beings face, but specifically for the black man in America, um, we're gonna be in a place that we are as a community. So Dream to a Nightmare is a homage to addressing the same social ills that MLK talked about, 50, 60 years ago during the civil rights movement.
Awesome. So where can we find your work?
Um, my album, The Truth, the Way to Life, is streaming on all music digital platforms. And I'll be honest, I haven't been marketing and promoted the way that I need to or want to, because as an artist, I don't get paid for those plays or those fans. So as I continue to move in my space, as I'm talking to a couple investors, I'm gonna go old school with the project, put it on vinyl, um, and CD, and digitally send people to my website. But that's where I am now. But right now, people can go to any streaming platform and stream it to listen to it. If people want a copy of my book, um, with the call to action regarding the Memorial Holiday Weekend ceasefire, May 24th through the 28th. I'm also will be hosting the Peace, Love, Forgiveness, Poetry, and Comedy on the Block. And I plan on self-funding it. And I'm funding it by the sale of my book. I need
Okay.
300 Chicagoans who believe in my work to pay for the book at $100.
Okay.
They can cash at me at Kweisi Gaharo, Kweisi Gaharo, KWEISIGHARREAU, KWEISIGHARREAU. Cash at me $100. I need 300 people to purchase at 100. I'm a fund because I got to get the word out regarding it digitally, marketing, do some flyers, do some ad buys, and then got to pay for some permits. I want to ask some of my celebrity friends who are from Chicago but live in Hollywood, even if they lend their service and their talents to the cause, I'm still have to pay for them to fly into Chicago. Because Little Real, the comedian from the West Side, Little Real, Pastor Chris, when he was 14, he was in my writing curriculum, MTVP, Minimizing Thoughts of Violence Through Poetry, in which I was teaching at the James Jordan Boys and Girls Club. And a Little Real would come into my class. He was always creatively disruptive, telling jokes and riding his peers. I'm like, Little Real, if you this way in my writing session, are you this way in class? He's like, yes, Mr. Kweisi, I am. And I said, look, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give you 2 to 3 minutes when we come in here to do some stand-up. Tell your jokes. If you're funny, your peers will laugh. If you're not, they're gonna tell you to take that one back to the lab. I say, so go to one of your teachers and ask them if they will give you 2 to 3 minutes in class that you could do your stand-up. I say, because you're very talented. You have the it factor. He asked one of his teachers. They gave him the time to do as such. I say, study the craft. Continue to write. Because I said, you got the it factor. You are funny. I said, but you can't be the class clown. Be the class comedian. So I'm not saying I wrote one joke for Little Real, but I was the adult in his life that saw that it factor in him that said, you need to take this serious because you're talented. And when we have adults and young people lives like that, you could change their trajectory on how they see themselves, give them that self-confidence, that self-worth to put them on a new trajectory or a different path in their life. And that's how me utilizing my art has had an impact, not just on him, but other students as well.
That's awesome. You said something, I don't want to leave it out. You were talking about how poetry has helped with trauma, but not just that, but the doors that open for you because of your poetry. And something that people throw around now to me, purpose over position.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you were in school studying marketing, correct? Marketing,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
But now you're a poet and doors have opened for you. And you talked about the impact that your poetry has done.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna put that concept to you. Purpose over position. Sometimes we seek a position, but we may miss our purpose. Do you feel like poetry is your purpose?
Oh, definitely. That's I'm like, I lived in Pastor Chris. I lived in Hollywood for 17 years. I wrote 3 poems. 3 poems. I was in the wilderness of myself as a human being, But when I got home, I became nominated for Chicago's Inaugural Poet Laureate. Put myself at the doorstep of the Grammys. It put me back on path of my passion and my purpose regarding my poetry. that I reconnected with the spirit within myself as an artist, as a human being. Um, and I love LA, but I'm in love with Chicago because I've been to the Grammy several times as a brand strategist handling specific clients. But my poetry put me at the doorstep of being a contender to become a nominee, moving back to Chicago. If I'd have stayed in LA another year, I wouldn't have had the opportunity that I had now. So poetry has been my purpose. Now through my purpose, it's allotted me opportunities for certain positions in life, you know. But I have to be in my purpose in order to get those particular opportunities or those positions. And for me, you know, the good news teaches it. Your gift will make room for you.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And my gift, which is my poetry, is making room for me in ways in which um, I would have never foreseen if I wasn't doing who and what I am. Because my degree is in marketing. I use because people say, "How you gonna become a poet? You got a degree." Well, now I'm just like, well, I'm gonna use my degree to market my poetry.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying? And that's what I've been doing in this space. But yeah, poetry is definitely, you know, my purpose. And through my art, I'm able to go from the classroom, K through fifth, or middle school or junior high or college, to a church to share and perform, or to a comedy club where there's a ruckus cloud. And when I perform, I can make silence fall upon the room like raindrops.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's the power of and the purpose of my poetry through the grace and mercy of God, that I'm able to go into these rooms and connect with kids as young as 5, 6, or 7 to someone in their 70s or 80s that can identify, you know, with my work.
Besides Memorial Day weekend, what you're working on, I know. What's next? What else? What other things you see yourself doing in the near future?
Well, I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna put my hat back on the table for poet laureate for the city of Chicago next year. Now, I don't need that position to do the work that I'm doing, but whatever I do in life, I try to achieve the highest level in that particular space.
Yes.
And for me, the highest level of achievement in my art form is being poet laureate. Now, the position didn't initially uh, exist in Chicago, but now that it does, so I'm gonna put my hat back on the table for that. But more than anything, I'm gonna continue to do the work to serve God by serving the people. You know, I don't need that position to do the work that I'm doing, but I want to achieve the highest level. That's why I went to study abroad in Oxford, England. Oxford, England is the mecca of literature. So if I wanted to be an athlete, I'm gonna go to the best institution that would allow me to reach that particular sport that I was interested in to get to that next level. So for me, it was Oxford. So that's why I went to study abroad in a master's program to become the best version of myself in this art form that I'm able to highlight it, and also help other people identify with. Because we all are poets. We all have a story to tell. Now, I ain't saying you got to be, you know, myself, but you find your own voice through your own story, and you become the best version of yourself. And the great thing about us as individuals, can't nobody be us but us.
Yes.
And until we identify that, I ain't trying to be like nobody else. I ain't trying to be like I wasn't influenced to write by other poets. Now, when I became a poet, I started doing research on other poets. You know, like my mentor, rest in peace, Kweisi Harris. He said, "Man, you got a spirit of Gil Scott Heron. You know, you need to know who he is." So he would give me all these cassette tapes and video. Back in the day, you had the videos, you know, for those, you know, young people. Those beta joint. But
Yeah.
nonetheless,
They don't know about
yeah, yeah.
that.
And so I was like, Gil Scott Heron, he's from Chicago,
Yeah.
poet, you know. He had this piece called The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. So I wrote a piece, The Revolution Will Be Televised. So I paid homage to him. I read with poets like the last poets. I read with Sonia Sanchez. I read with Miss Gwendolyn Brooks. You know, I read with the last poets. Yeah, I read with my contemporaries like Jay Ivey. Matter of fact, any poet that's from Chicago came through me first, because I was a pioneer in introducing poetry to mainstream Chicago back in the early 90s on the Rick Party show on WGCI.
Yeah.
And I would highlight other poets on my show, my segment. Jay Ivey, Avery Guy Young, who's currently the poet laureate of the city of Chicago, Kim Ransom, Jessica K. Moore from Detroit, Reggie Gimson, rest in peace, Sister Brenda Matthews, brother Mario. I would feature other poets on my segment, You know, Malik Youssef, 18-time Grammy winner. He writes a lot for Beyonce, Jay-Z, yeah. So I've been a pioneer in the space and introducing poetry to mainstream Chicago. So I am just seeking to be a light for the art form and have other people use writing as a way to deal and process that pain, hurt, anger, hate, and trauma. Because once we do that to ourselves, then we could really start to move the needle and start healing our community.
That's dope. That's dope. That's dope.
Yeah.
So, can we connect with you, or what are you on any social media platform?
Yes. People connect and follow me on Instagram at Kweisi, Kweisi, the brand. Kweisi, Kweisi, the brand. Facebook is Kweisi Gaharo. But follow me on Instagram. Again, you can get the book. This is how we're going to fund the Memorial Holiday Weekend, the peace, love, forgiveness, poetry, and comedy on the block. And yeah, I need 300 people. And that business model is from the late, great Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey, you know, he was tragically killed a few years ago. His business model was, I don't need 10 million people to buy my work. I just need 1,000 people to believe in my work, to support my art. And these 1,000 people, you have 72 hours to get a copy of my album, $100. And that's what he did. Those 1,000 people who was believe of his work became super fan. They get, every time he released an album, those 1,000 people will buy his album. And so my favorite number is 2. So I'm gonna bump that up to 2,000. And that's who I'm seeking to appeal to as I continue to move in this art, in this space from a commercial standpoint and profiting off of my art. Is I need 2,000 people to support my work, you know, but right now I need 300 people, 300 Chicagoans to believe in my cause, to purchase the book, to help me fund. Because I met with the powers to be. I met at the mayor's office with the mayor's office. I met with the Cook County Commissioner's office. I met with JAC, and I'm tired of playing political ping pong. Go to this call. Now I was just like, you know what? I keep waiting for y'all. Another Memorial Weekend is gonna go by, and historically it's going to be violent. So I said, let me just do it myself. So I'm gonna fund it. So Nipsey's like, yo, he used his money to invest back in himself, but also the community. So that's what I'm gonna do through the sale of my art.
That's dope.
Yeah, but you can get my art, Kweisi Gaharo. And if you go to kgpr-la.com, kgpr-la.com. If you really want to connect with me, my 7 digits are on my brand strategy PR website, kgpr-la.com.
Well, Kweisi, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down with me, to spend some time with the Open Door podcast. You are a blessing, you know, to us, and we look forward to seeing more of your work and seeing more of the impact that you have in Chicago.
I appreciate you sharing the platform with me, Pastor Chris. And you know, I'm here about, you know, what's ahead for me. God has truly given me a vision for myself. Constantly working on, you know, I'm the clay, he's the potter, to make me what I need to be to serve him, that I might serve the people. And that's all I'm seeking to do to with my work, you know, and change lives and inspire people. That's it, you know. So that's my story, Pastor Chris, and I'm sticking to it.
Hey, I'm with it. I'm with it. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you as well for taking the time to check out this episode. What a blessing my brother was to us, the information, the knowledge he gave us. Before we get out of here, I just want to give a shout out to the Dream Team, Blessed Dreams Production, my boy Alfred, Eyes Have Not Seen, my sister Marilyn. Also, remember, you can connect with me on Instagram, Young King. And until the next episode drops, be blessed.
Don't ever take nothing for granted, man. Hey, you gotta wake up and realize that